Okay, we are back again. I'm imagining a three-part series here, talking about the 16th century. This is actually totally wrong. Good thing I checked my board before I started. We're going to talk about the 16th century, the very end of the 15th, but we just kind of have to skip the 15th pretty much, other than a few general things, and then just rapidly finish up the British section rapidly by maybe 5 more hours of lecturing, and then we have a midterm. So I'll be continuing to talk about the things that I mentioned already. We're sort of halfway through the third chapter, and as I said, the end of chapter 3 is the content from the end of the introduction to the beginning of the fourth chapter is the midterm exam, and then we'll do 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. We'll see how much. It's always a question mark how much of chapter 8 gets done, and if you get that far in the book, you'll see kind of chapter 8 is the shortest chapter, and that's fine because it's the last one, but that's just the reality of sort of shying away from the current political climate, so that most students don't feel too strongly about the way things are presented. Meaning, we have controversy in America, which is kind of at the heart of American culture, and always has been. So it's okay to talk about it, but some of these things don't age well when you react to them quickly. So we won't react to them quickly, for the most part. But I think part of the understanding of British culture, especially the 16th and 17th century, will demonstrate that what is happening now in our world is new, but has some similar sort of patterns that have existed for a long time. And specifically with America, those patterns go into England and Britain, Scotland, Ireland, colonization, imperialism. They're all tied together. And if you look at the big picture, it's overall not a bad one, unless you're in a particular situation. And then, I mean, if you're living at the wrong time, I think overall Great Britain was a sort of one of the best places to live in the last 1,000 years. That's a big claim. But I don't see if you take a 1,000-year look at humanity, where would you choose to live? Let's say, for just the sake of the thought experiment, because this is something I think AI doesn't do very well yet, and we can talk about these very abstract, fanciful ideas. Where would you live if you chose to live anywhere for the last 1,000 years continuously? I'm thinking England might be up there, right? If you live from 1066 until 21 or 2066, 1,000 years from the Norman Conquest until, and we'll just stay in my case, maybe 2066 I'll be 85 years old. I'd probably choose England or Scotland. That's not because of my ethnicity or because of my studies or because of my language. It's just because the conditions there overall average out to a better situation. But we have to remember, it's not a continuously good situation. It's rocky all the way through. And if you chose the last 100 years, I think America would probably be number one for most people if you chose 100 years. If you chose 1,000 years, it'd be British. If you chose 2,000 years, well, who knows? I don't know. Italy? China? That's beyond the scope of my comprehension. I don't really think a supercomputer would not have a better answer than me. So anyway, we're here just to understand. We're using English. It's sort of a backbone of trade and economics and research. It's a global language. There are other choices. Arabic, some of our students know. Korean's in the top 20. I think Korea is close to. I think Korean language users are close to the economic standing of Korea. So something like 12th. Didn't look that up. So if you Google me or AI me, I could be wrong there. But the top languages are English and Mandarin and Spanish and French and Arabic that are used in many countries. Okay, so let's zoom in though. We're going to talk about early modern Britain. I took a few classes about early modern English, which is not a place. So, I mean, early modern English is maybe what I should say, but the title of the class is British and American Culture. So it's always something about, well, what does that mean? English versus British. I think it's British has a positive and a negative side to it. Definitely more international and more inclusive in a way. But in another way, it's definitely more like imperial. It's the imposition of policies and leaders in England imposing themselves on other countries. And really, America, despite its resistance and revolutionary ideas, sort of just eventually becomes the successor state to the British Empire. Whether that was the intent or not, a lot of the British people just call Americans, people who don't want to pay taxes. And we have talked about that already. Death and taxes is really the breaking point for the combination of financial burden and loss of life in any country, in any culture, is normally the point at which the society starts to revolt, resist, because you got your life and you got your possessions, and beyond that you're sacrificing everything material. I guess the remaining things would be spiritual. That's part of the early modern change. We talked about religion being the center of English life. It was the center of all European life. And there's a shift of this away from religious focus towards some sort of humanistic focus, right? The Inmun is humanities, right? And it's named humanities because it's the study of human beings, and it's supposed to be grounded from the human perspective rather than religious studies. So we're in the Inmunde. We're supposed to, religion is part of it, but it's not the whole thing, and it doesn't dominate your life the same way. No matter how religious you are, the average person is less religious now than 500 years ago. So you got 1485 rather, the end of the War of the Roses, and the start of the Tudor reign, including Henry VII, which we've talked about. And at the same time, Spain becomes unified. Isabella and Ferdinand have a daughter, Catherine. She becomes the first wife of Henry. That she marries Arthur. Arthur dies. Henry VIII ascends to the throne and marries his brother's widow, which presents a problem because, you're not supposed to do that there's dispute. It's not clear exactly what you're supposed to do according to scripture or according to what, the church rules are. So Henry has to get a divorce. He has to get permission to marry his wife, which I did not mention, but since she was married to his older brother, first she has to get permission, and then he has to marry her because the Pope, the papal permission is granted to her and him to be married, despite the fact that she's technically his older sister, right, by marriage. They get married, and everything's fine until she doesn't have a boy, right? They end up just having Mary. Not to say just Mary, but they have Mary, and he needs a boy, and she's getting older, so we had to go through the whole process again. And the problem is the Pope actually is a different Pope, because the Pope that gave him permission to get married to Catherine dies. So it's a new Pope, and he doesn't want to reverse the decision of another previous leader of the church. It's a technical thing, but it's a huge one. And I told you also Catherine is related to the King of Spain, and she's related to the Holy Roman Emperor, and they have control of the Catholic Church kind of with their power and their states. So Henry gets frozen out, and his solution is he makes the Church of England. He ends up going through several wives, and then his second wife has a girl named Elizabeth. His third wife has a boy named Edward, and then he goes through a couple more marriages, 6 in total, magic number there, and then he passes away and makes sure that Edward is next, and after Edward is Mary, and after Mary is Elizabeth. And I suppose that's kind of it's evidence of how powerful and how strong and how much Henry has changed England during his reign, that even after he's dead, usually people fight a lot over this, but there is fighting, but it's not like before his dad. It's not like the 15th century, which is a total breakdown, and everybody's fighting everybody like Game of Thrones. And that's why the 15th century is inspiration for Game of Thrones. But Edward is not a healthy kid, and he ends up dying before he becomes a man. And he's very Protestant, and his older sister Mary is not. So she becomes the queen, and she's super Catholic, so everybody's kind of going one direction, and then Mary tries to reverse it. And if she had lived longer, she might have done it, but she doesn't live very long. She only rules for she rules for 5 or 6 years, and then she's gone. And then Elizabeth, at the age of 25, gets released from the Tower, and she appears, and she never gets married. She, that's the key thing. She's the Virgin Queen, right? And you can see this in evidence, for example, the state of Virginia in America. The Virginia colony is named after her. She takes this seriously, that she's not been physical with anybody. Nobody really knows if that's true or not, but it's tied up in this word chastity, which chaste is something that is a female virtue that women have, and once they lose it, they can never get it back, because it's related to them being innocent and honest and not having been with a man yet. And in lots of societies, this is important, right? Islam, any country that is Islamic, a Muslim country, that there's a difference of opinion. There's different rules for men and women, and the rules have changed over the years, and gender and sex and equality and female and male rights have still not sort of resulted in a permanent solution. You can see this in America right now. They're rolling back marriage law and birth control. It's not something that you need to agree with or disagree with. It's your choice whether you agree with it. It's just a fact 500 years ago that this is the perspective that people had. So Queen Elizabeth has some additional things to overcome, which I think it actually makes her more impressive, not less, because she accomplished everything she did while overcoming the things that would normally prevent a woman from doing what she did. On the other hand, she calls herself a prince, and she is, like Shakespeare does, playing with this gender role and calling herself, sometimes she's definitely a woman, but she's a powerful, particular type of woman, and she's an exception. She's an exceptional woman. I think, she gets these nicknames and everything, and she's sometimes she's using. She's very intelligent. There's no question about that. Same with her older sister, and Henry. I told you a lot of bad stuff about Henry, but one of the things that's impressive about him is that he was musically talented. He was athletic. He fought in wars. He wrestled the King of France. He lost, but and he got injured hunting, so he had a bad leg. But he was just good at everything. He was super talented, and dangerous man. Very talented, very smart, very dangerous, super egotistical. He obviously knew that he was powerful and he was intelligent, and that his will, not the physical will, but his literally his mental will kind of continues to influence everyone long after he's dead, even until now. If you ask anybody who they know, like the first king or queen of England I knew was Henry VIII, because my mom, there's a song about his having 6 wives. I'm gonna have to ask her how to find it. I didn't do my homework, but anyway, there is a song, and she told me about Henry VIII having 6 wives, and I was like, what? You're only supposed to have 1, right, Mom? And she was like, obviously. This is, I guess, elementary school. So, the sing-song, rhyming stuff that originates from back then continues into the present day. And it's sort of, Henry VIII is a monster, his presence, he is a unstoppable force. That's all you can say. I would give him the thumbs down, and overall I would give Elizabeth a thumbs up, because she has to be, like, her power is checked by the fact that she's a woman. And I mean, most people think, and I think this is the most probable answer, is that she never got married, because if she got married to the prince or king or whoever it was, she would be demoted and the king would take over, which does happen, you know. Mary gets married to the King of Spain, Philip, and she is some more. I mean, what people are worried about is the King of Spain telling England what to do, and she's fine with that. But Elizabeth is not. She's not fine with a French prince or a Dutch prince or anybody telling her what to do. We'll talk about this, almost 200 years later. I mean, at the end of the 17th century, William III, he's going to come over from the Netherlands, and he's going to be married to another Mary, and he's going to refuse. I mean, they're kind of equal partners, and they have to share the power, but she just gives it to him. Because that's what's expected, and he refuses to be even sort of equal to her, in the military sense, at the very least. So you can imagine Queen Elizabeth is dealing with this prejudice much earlier. So she creates these people create these for her. Gloriana, one of the great creators, one of my greatest influence is Dr. Goff, from McMaster University. She taught me a class about Edmund Spenser. He writes about Ireland. He writes about Queen Elizabeth. There's a lot of imagery and allegory, super long poetry. Nobody reads it anymore, but I did. And one of the images that he propagates is this perfect, chaste woman named Gloriana, right? And she's like a kind of, Queen Elizabeth is like Superman, Clark Kent is the regular guy, and then he turns into Superman in a telephone booth, or Spider-Man if you prefer, right? Peter Parker, he's like a regular university student. He gets bit by a spider, and whenever there's some danger or a thief or some crime or a super villain, and outer space, the more recent movies are a lot crazier than what I saw when I was young, but Spider-Man is there. Spider-Man appears to save the day. Gloriana is kind of like a superhero alter ego. In Edmund Spenser's work, at least, that's how she's kind of portrayed, as this. She's got magical powers, and she's not a normal person. And that's supposed to reflect, Queen Elizabeth is not a normal person. She's the queen. She has power. One of the biggest moments that'll happen in her lifetime is what we call the Spanish Armada. But you have to know this. This is going to be the result, pretty much, of this tension created by Spain and England being friends, and Spain being super Catholic, and England breaking away from that sphere of influence and making their own church. And after Mary dies, they reattach themselves, right? Catherine is married, and it's a good, Henry VII thinks it's great. His oldest son is married to the princess from Spain, and Columbus goes across, and all of a sudden there's a Spanish Empire, and there was like literally a fight for Spain decades before, and then Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand get married, and Granada surrenders, and it's like 1491, and then the Reconquista, conquering of Spain is over, and the Islamic armies continue in North Africa, in Morocco, right across the water, but Spain is sort of becomes a country. It really isn't. It's just a kind of bunch of kingdoms fighting each other. Some of them are Christian, some of them are Islamic, and there's a mix. Then it becomes unified, and they end up with a super Catholic agenda for hundreds of years. And that's just the way history went. And all of a sudden, you've got Columbus going across the Atlantic and coming back and saying he went to India, but he's mistaken. He's in the Caribbean. But this is a clean 100 years later, almost. 1592 is the Imjin War in Korea. 1492 is when Columbus sails the ocean blue. So you've got about 100 years of Spanish expansion. So the Spanish Empire is nearing its maybe maximum power sort of thing when it fights against tries to invade England and fails. Queen Elizabeth is not young anymore when in 1588, she's already been the Queen of France, It's always the Queen of France because of Marie Antoinette. She's been the Queen of England for a couple decades. So she's not 25 anymore. She's getting close to 50. And she makes a speech. She dresses up in armor and gets on a horse and everything. And she makes a speech called the Speech at Tilbury, where she calls herself a prince. This is what I'm saying. And she's, at this point, people know she's not going to have a kid with anybody. She's not going to have a prince. She's not going to get married to anybody. People have been asking her to get married since she became queen. And by this point, they know even if she gets married, she can't really have kids. She's too old. So she's literally saying, like, I am your king. I'm a queen, I'm a woman, and you gotta understand that, but I'm your leader, and I'm married to the country, and it's just she's just a very, very intelligent, persuasive person. She does this speech and she does this performance, and you gotta understand that obviously she loved Shakespeare, because she was performing all the time. She was the best performer. If she was an actress, she would have been the best actress in any Shakespeare play. She could have played Lady Macbeth. She could have played any of the female roles. I think Lady Macbeth is the one that comes to mind. But there's no sort of dominant female role in any of Shakespeare's plays. She could have played Hamlet's mother. She could have played Portia. Whatever. She could have played it if she wanted to. And she was impressed by Shakespeare. And that's just another, I guess, feather in Shakespeare's hat, that it was very difficult to please her. And what she did is, to a certain extent, she was always getting all the men to compete with each other to get her approval, right? This is her solution to the power problem, is that Queen Elizabeth is basically controlling groups of men to see, who can get the queen's, you're the best. You get the money, or you get the ships, or you get the power, or like, if you do this, then I will give you approval. She's always sort of in control, of the whole situation. Imagine you were a female president and every single person in the government was a man, except for you. It's not like being the queen and having a king beside you, because your power is derived from the king. But she's deriving power from herself, which is not good enough normally, but she makes it work for like 40 years. No offense to the second Queen Elizabeth, who just passed away a couple of years ago, Queen Elizabeth Away, QEW, but QE1, Queen Elizabeth I, that's why Queen Elizabeth II was named Elizabeth, and she became queen. And she's another example, I think, of one of the better monarchs in English history for what she did in her role, and understanding that. That's sort of, Queen Elizabeth was a master at understanding what she could do and what she couldn't do. Masterclass on management of people, society. So you get this impression that everything during Queen Elizabeth's rule was great, but in fact it was not. It was terrible. There's 5 major issues, but I'm just going to change this to concerns, and we'll pretend that we are living at the time, right? Looking backwards is easy to say, oh, these things are always going to be a problem, or we have those problems today, so what's the big deal? We haven't overcome them, but some of them are not on the list. This is a list that is from Robert Buckles. His alma mater is Oxford, so the tendency is to respect those people anyway, but I've listened to his lecture a dozen times at least. I might be getting more, I'm definitely in double digits. It was a huge influence on me and in my book. Robert Buckles, I don't know if he might be retired by now, but I didn't this time, but I often listened to his lectures before. I just didn't have time this semester, but in preparation for this, 16th century, 17th century thing, this is his idea, the Tudor Stuart period, he calls it, because there's 2 dynasties. We talked about the Tudors already. We're going to talk about the Stuarts. And if you put them together, that's what you get. And he lectures extensively, much more extensively than I am, about this period. This is one of the major things that he mentions that sort of covers the whole thing. So let me explain to you what this means as he explained it to me. And I've never met him. I just listened to the lectures when I put them on my phone. So he says there's these 5 things that overcome, and he actually adds one thing, which is related to the leadership quality, which I've just been talking about for the last 20 minutes, is Queen Elizabeth is special. She has exceptional talent that goes beyond what she does, more than a man could do, despite the fact that she has some things to overcome. Whatever reasons there are for that, it's for us to think about. But certainly one of them is she's intelligent and very perceptive, and she's got a political awareness that, I don't know if there's a political IQ, but hers would be genius level. So these are the things that she has to deal with. Sovereignty. Who has the actual power? Her problem is she's a woman. So the main thing is she's Henry the VIII's daughter, and that's obvious because she's powerful and confident and intelligent and good looking. That helps. If she was an ugly, stupid person, she would not have succeeded. That's not an opinion. That's just the reality of she had a lot of things against her, so she didn't need any extra things. But she is attractive, and she's confident. She has a strong personality, and she's multilingual, talented, and intelligent, and that gains respect. And without that respect, there's no way that she could be the leader. So this, who has the power? The prince, the king, the queen, or the people, or the dukes, or whatever. That's what sovereignty is. Sovereign is the respect of a person's power. So that's the major thing. It's the biggest issue. Once that is, she manages that problem and juggles all the power and influence of everyone, including herself. She's got to deal with money problems because, as you know, her dad spent all the money, and her older brother and her older sister didn't solve the problem. So she's constantly, this problem never goes away. Her solutions to this is she can't do taxes, right? She has other ways to do it. She gives titles, right? And monopolies, and she gives, permission for things. She gives, she promotes people. She gives people permission to do things. She gives people the ability to tax certain products. Like a monopoly doesn't mean I'm the only one who makes this product, as in modern, definitions of monopoly. It means that, all the soap in the kingdom, every bar of soap, you get 1 penny for each bar of soap. And she gives a soap monopoly to one guy. She gives the nail monopoly to another, and, whatever. She gives there's a joke. She gives these monopolies of products, horseshoes, stuff like that. Every time you sell a horseshoe, you gotta and there's a list of them, and they hate them. This is kind of like a replacement for tax, but it's not a tax, remember? This is a tariff. It's a duty on international. It's not a tax. I'm lowering your tax, America. Okay, just kidding. But this is the same argument. It's like, oh, I'm not doing it. I'm not taxing you. This is called a monopoly. Okay, fine. So all soap I have to pay. It's a sales tax. That's what it is. It's a sales tax. What is a tariff? A tariff is who's paying that? The American people are buying stuff from other countries, and they're paying double. That's a crazy tax. I lowered your tax on your income, but you have to pay twice as much for your food, for your wood, for your steel, for your fans, for your chairs, for your tables. You got to pay double for everything. I'm increasing 100%. It's not true that the companies and the other country are going to. It's going to hurt the other country. It's going to hurt the companies, but they can't survive. They've got to give some of that burden to the consumer. Which, what does that translate into? Probably, if it's 100% on all Chinese things, it means 50% of Chinese, of the goods that come from China, 50% of that cost is going to be absorbed by the American people. Inflation is going to go crazy. This is elementary stuff, but nobody, it's very easy to fool people. This happened, but it's very unpopular. And at a certain point, this is going to make the people who levy tariffs, is going to make them super unpopular. Whoever the person may be, no matter what their situation is or their background. So they hate the monopolies and they try to get rid of them. But she's always very clever and avoids canceling them. But there's one instance there, one of the MPs, one of the representatives, says, "Bread? Is bread not there?" Because bread is a matter of survival. that is the point, by the way, that America is at right now, is that the government shut down weeks ago, and they're running out of money to operate the government. So there's about 40 million people that get money for food, like in the form of food stamps, and direct funding for food, not cash in their accounts. Like they get supplied with food. That money is almost gone. It's called SNAP. It's supposed to be, even if you stop the operation of the government, it's supposed to be secured by money from the agricultural department and other things, but it's sort of being canceled. So again, we're talking about these are fundamental problems. She needs money to operate her government. The people need enough money to be able to run their businesses and pay for bread. So when the person says is bread not there? It's because they're saying, are you gonna put a tax on bread? If you put a tax on bread, then you're gonna, like, nobody would say that to Queen Elizabeth or King Henry unless they wanted to get their head cut off, right? So like when you get to that point where you're saying out loud something that the Queen definitely doesn't want to hear, she knows, and you know, you're at the point where if you make a bread tax, if you make a monopoly on bread, if you make us pay pennies on the dollar for our bread, we're going to do something serious. Okay? So that's the financial problems are huge. She borrows a lot of money, and she goes to Parliament. She asks for permission for taxes and stuff. So she overcomes those things, but she's always got money problems. This is one of the things, along with her being a woman and a queen who's young, kind of prevent her from being like her father, doing whatever she wants, which might be a good thing in some ways, but the religious thing is something that she doesn't want to deal with. She's actually pretty Protestant, but she likes the Catholic Church because the Catholic Church has nice, neat arrangement of people and respect for, higher people in that their, hierarchy in the pyramid. So it's a tied to class, her respect for people's individual religious practices. And so she stays out of that problem by saying, okay, you go to church sometimes, we're going to check, we're going to make sure that you observe the English church. What you do in your private life is your business. Local control is a matter of that political manipulation. Some of the people in the kingdom are very powerful and rich and have the ability to raise armies and build ships and stuff like that. And she has to balance her power in the center over the entire country with these people sort of in the countryside, right? The local people. And finally, she's always got problems with France and Spain. The Spanish Armada is, because she doesn't get married and she doesn't play the international political game, foreign policy is tough for her to deal with, just because, she manages it by saying, oh, I'll choose somebody later, or maybe the Prince of France, or maybe a Spanish prince, or maybe somebody from Germany or whatever, Poland or something. But I'm not sure. And that goes, she continues doing that dance until the dance is over and nobody wants to marry. She is definitely the number one choice of anybody in Europe, but there's kind of nobody her level, to be frank. Like, there's anybody who's intelligent or good enough for her, like a good match for her, doesn't have the rank. Like, she's the Queen of England. The prince has got to be at least her level in terms of power, or she doesn't really want to do it. And if he has more power than her, then she doesn't want to do it either. She wants to control, she wants to steer the ship. So, yeah. I mean, that's why we call it the Elizabethan period. It's really early modern England 1.01. Henry VIII kind of steers things, the ship into a dangerous place, and it starts sinking with his son and his first daughter, and Queen Elizabeth pulls, the ship around and turns it in the right direction. But we're going to find out that the 17th century is a disaster. Anyway, but Queen Elizabeth, it looks like the golden age, but I mean they still have the same problems. There's people getting sick. There's plagues all the time. People get influenza. People literally get the plague. There's people dying all the time. She tries to start colonies. They fail. The Spanish, she's trying. She doesn't have enough money. So it's a rough time. There's lots of unemployment. People are starving. These are the 5 major issues or major concerns. There's plenty of other things that some of those things get resolved and some of them don't. But these are the most important ones, and we can't talk about everything. We don't have that much time, so that's the condensed version of Queen Elizabeth I. I hope it was interesting, in that, if you have any questions, you bring them up in class, because we have one more class before we do the midterm. So please, if you have if something is not clear, you're reading through a textbook and I haven't covered it, the textbook is sort of goes together with the lectures to give you the material that you need to know. So if you have any questions, please ask. And that's it for the first part. Thank you for listening.